Welcome to When We Die Talks. I'm your host, Zach Ansell. In this podcast, we explore different beliefs about what happens when we die and how those ideas shape the way we live. Thanks for tuning in. I'm glad you're here. Hey everyone, Happy New Year and welcome to the first episode of When We Die Talks for 2025. Excited to be back. It's been a little strange not working on the project consistently over the past couple weeks, and I'm definitely noticing I'm a little rusty on the microphone. Probably trying to record this intro for the past, 20 or 30 minutes. So hopefully this is the one. But I know this year there's going to be a lot of great conversations. But I also know that the last 2 years, this project's gone in ways that I didn't even expect. And I have to imagine the same thing is going to happen this year. So hopefully at the end of this year, I'll be looking back and really excited about what we created. To kick things off today, I'm really excited about this conversation, but also I want to share a new format I'm going to be trying out over the next couple weeks. Starting with this episode, I'll be releasing an episode every week. The format will alternate between interview episodes like this one and follow-up episodes where I dive into the themes and ideas I discuss with my guests. We're going to see how that goes, see if you guys like it. My thought processes, I'm going to share things I wish I had asked, insights that stood out to me, and even answer some questions the guests have for me. These follow-up episodes will definitely be shorter, but I'm hoping this will be a great way for me to incorporate myself into the conversation a little bit more and explore the topics on a more personal level. Now, for this episode, I sit down with Don Silas, who is an incredible human, and I'm so excited to introduce him to all of you. We discuss his experience facing mortality, starting with a blood condition, and more recently, ALS. Don shares how these diagnoses have challenged his perspective on life and death, and how his spiritual beliefs have shaped the way he approaches the uncertainty of what happens when we die. This is definitely a longer episode, and I think it's a really important one. Don offers some incredibly thoughtful reflections on navigating life with terminal illness, and his perspective on embracing life fully, despite the inevitable, is something I think everyone can take something from. We talk about everything from the practicalities of planning for death to how science and religion can complement each other in understanding life's bigger questions. Don doesn't shy away from the hard realities of his condition, but he also brings a fresh and inspiring outlook to the conversation. If you're ready for a discussion that's honest, deeply reflective, and a little unconventional, this one's for you. I hope you enjoy. Before we really kind of get into it, I wanted to tell a little story about you. We met up for coffee. And we were to do this interview a couple months ago. And I had an accident and had to get eye surgery. And the day after, you were the first person to reach out to me, which I found very, very sweet. You know, we had just met and I thought that was very nice of you. And I think there was kind of two things that came out of that. There was this gratitude knowing that this project is going to lead me to amazing people like yourself and to be able to create some really awesome connections with people. I think the other one is, and we'll kind of get into your kind of diagnosis and all that stuff, but I think we all kind of get trapped in our own worlds a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's been a tough year for me. But in that moment, and I don't want to compare our situations or anything, but you have a lot going on. And for you to reach out to me and just say, hope you're doing okay, thinking of you. There's a lot of gratitude in that of, knowing that we're all going through something and we're all humans.
Key. Yes.
And yeah, I just want to say thank you so much. It really was so sweet of you to do. And yeah, so I just want to say thank you for that.
Well, from our first conversation, I have gotten a sense of that you are an interesting person at minor. First of all, taking on this project and how we dialogued about it. And so it was, you are immediately, I recognized a person I wanted to know. And so I think that it is, on an interesting note, last December, a friend of mine invited me to go pick up his wine before Christmas. I don't drink. And I was saying to my wife, I wonder if if he knows that and if that's going to alter the experience for him. And I said, but I'm going anyway because I like the guy. And I got in the car. I told him that but what I learned in it is he was picking up different wines from different vineyards. And I realized, how he collects wines is how, in a sense, I collect people. I get to know, collecting sounds a little weird, but I seek out people who have interesting, different perspectives. And so I recognize that in you, and I am looking forward to this conversation and really, hopefully, many more, whether they're recorded or not.
Absolutely. Yeah. Likewise for me. And I'm excited to introduce you to, the podcast community, because I think everybody's going to really enjoy your story and, what you have to share. Again, from our initial conversation, we really connected and had some, just really good transfer of ideas, maybe is the way of saying it. And
it's an exchange of that was enjoyable and will be.
Yeah. And something that maybe more people should do.
Sounds good.
Let's get into, so you have kind of had a very interesting run the past decade with medical maladies. And I don't mean to put that lightly, but so before we get to kind of your more recent diagnosis, about a decade ago, you had a different one.
Yes. And a little background of myself. I have lifetime runner, hiking in the mountains, climbing mountains. I've done a half Ironman and several marathons, etc. And building houses, and always a physical person.
Very
on
active.
The move. Yeah. And actually it was 12 years ago, right around now, I got a diagnosis of what's called myelodysplastic syndrome or pre-leukemia. And it means that I have an alteration, a DNA alteration that creates in my bone marrow, I don't produce healthy blood cells. They come out, I love that they come out immature. So my wife could pick on me saying, I'm immature to the very marrow of my bone. And it normally ends up turning to leukemia, and quite often is fatal within 5 to 10 years. And my doctor initially said that I had 3 to 5 years to go. And so that was my first encounter with potential terminal disease. And then, as things progressed on and it never really matured, realized, well, it altered my perspective, which is a on long-term versus short-term activity.
Yeah, almost impossible for it not to.
Exactly. And then after a while, when I came to grips with the idea that, as my son had said, I'm sitting on a time bomb and I don't know if somebody has lit the fuse. But I have always had a sense of my spiritual immortality, if you wish, and we'll go into that more later. So it was a real test of perspective. You can have certain beliefs, but when somebody says, the time has run out, then you have to look deeply at what you say you believe and what you can put into action. So that was my first encounter with it. And then about 2 years ago, I'd kind of realized if it's going to kick in, it's going to be late, and I'll probably outlive it, die from old age.
Yeah. And so from there, we go into, and I don't want to say more serious, but a terminal diagnosis
there is no getting out of this one.
Yeah. And that was much more recent, in the past year.
Yes. A year ago, basically 13 months ago, I was diagnosed with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. And you've got a serious disease when I would tell especially my men friends, And the first thing out of their mouth was, "Oh, shit."
That's not what you want to hear.
Even when the doctors tell you and they're being solemn, you know, because there's no cure for ALS. And for those that are going to be watching this, I won't go into the details of it, but it is one that sucks all your physical ability, and then you basically suffocate at the end, is how it goes. And so it's not a pleasant way out.
So looking at the two kind of diagnoses, the first one you said you were very aware of your timeline and all that. How did that change at all with, this ALS diagnosis, with the ticking time bomb, how did that change your mentality? Or was it kind of continuing as this new world that you had been living in for?
That is an excellent question. I think the first one, if you wish, was an interesting test run because I had to come to the idea that I had within my system the potential of a terminal disease, or if nothing else, a very difficult disease to survive. And during that time, I still was running marathons and doing all this, staying as physical as I could, climbing mountains and all that. But in the back of your mind, it's always there.
Yeah.
And it made me start thinking, looking at and studying not just from my own faith perspective, but a lot of different holy writings about death and dying. And because within my religious perspective is the idea that science and religion should go hand in hand, I very much avoided what I will call this superstition of death, the wishes of immortality, and looked for, if I would say, logical proofs of, but there's no smoking gun. But there is a lot of evidence that suggests we have something beyond our physical being, that we are more than the sum of our parts. So I had been contemplating that, and really that had been off from a lifetime of looking at this question.
I just had this realization, maybe why we get along so well is that we're doing the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm dialoguing with as many people as I can about this idea of death.
Yeah.
So that, I can come up with other ideas. And I'll continue to say it that, I'm crowdsourcing ideas and trying to figure out something to believe in or to just come to terms with what I believe.
Exactly.
But we're doing the same thing, right? We're going out and trying to challenge our own narratives. Well, now I'm just talking like we're, really great people to try to
I think a lot of people would benefit by doing this. Most of us are raised in certain social, cultural, intellectual circles. People have a tendency to be born in and die in the same church or idea. We just accept these things as being true as opposed to investigating them. I think that one of the things that within my faith background, I think was imperative is that within the Baha'i faith, it hugely emphasizes independent investigation of truth. I was never baptized a Baha'i, and it was if I found it to be true, then I should continue on. If not, then continue the search for truth. And that really is a lifetime process.
If you can maybe explain a little bit more about it, because when we talked about it, that was the first exposure that I had ever had to it. So I'm assuming, there's going to be other people listening that, haven't heard about it before.
Sure.
So I think, sharing some fundamentals and
on a brief note, and we'll touch on things more later, the Baha'i faith believes in God, but believes there's only one God of the universe. And it doesn't matter what you call God by, Yahweh or Allah or God or the Great White Spirit or whatever the traditions are, it's the same source. It's the same being. But it also says that with that, since there's only one source of this divine truth, that all religions basically come from that same divine being. So in Baha'i cosmology and philosophy, I as a Baha'i have to accept the divinity of Jesus, of Abraham, of the Buddha, and Muhammad. And the prophet founder of the Baha'i faith is Baha'u'llah, which means the glory of God. And so we see that emphasize that there's really only one God of the cosmos, which is the known cosmos is about 93 billion light years across. And it's like, that's a little bit of space. and 14 billion years old. And so we see that whatever this God is the creator of all of this. But it is not humanoid, if you wish. But that is a long conversation. But so the last one of the what Baha'is call the three onenesses is that humankind is all one great big family. That again, it doesn't matter what colors we are, our cultures, we all come from the same source. One of the parts of the Baha'i faith that I particularly love and embrace is the idea of the harmony and oneness of science and religion. That religion without knowledge of the physical world can quickly move towards ignorance and superstition, which then can breed fear and hostility. But science without the balance of the spiritual application of life can move into doing horrific things to each other and to humankind. So it's science and religion are like the two wings of a bird. We need both of them to stay healthy. But Baha'i also says if you're going to fight about religion, you're probably better off without it. In other words, it's the purity of the actions we take, and as you're saying, to be kind with each other. The Baha'i faith is far more complex and deep than that, but that's it in a nutshell.
When did you get involved? Was this?
Well, interestingly, my parents became Baha'i when I was about 4 years old.
Okay.
But as I said, the Baha'i faith very much emphasizes the independent investigation of it. And so at the age of 15, if a person wants to continue their participation, they can declare themselves as a Baha'i and do that. If not, then that is their own journey. And it's not that the children of the Baha'is are left in a void. They just have to decide what they would like, what is truth for them. But there was a period of my life from about 18 to somewhere in my late 20s where I just wasn't sure about the idea of a God, first of all, and the idea that I, as a speck in a vast cosmos that is only going to live for a fleeting second, if you wish, in regards to time, it was like, how can I ever say what is true?
Yeah.
So that was a little bit of a question.
So within that, and I think it's, the question that I have to ask what do you think happens when we die? I assume your faith plays a part in that.
It does, a very big part in that. And I'm going to back up a little bit again in dealing with the idea of, so a year ago I had this diagnosis. In many ways, I was a little surprised how I quickly had to come to terms there was no getting out of this. But I had to look at it from this level. This is a devastating disease on people around you.
Yeah.
And if you hold on to every hope for life, you drain the life of everybody around you. Now, I'll have to give a little note that is going to be surprising to everybody. I'm 73. I'm old. The point being is, if it was you at being given this diagnosis, the hope is that science will find a cure. And so most ALS patients, some of them hold on to life a long ways.
Yeah.
I have a very, very strict, rigid DNR. They can't put a tube in me. They cannot put anything. And it is a lot on the level that, first of all, I see life as a gift. It's a precious gift. I love living. I love meeting people. I love my family and children and grandchildren. But I love them to where I will not, out of my fear of dying, suck the life out of them.
Yeah.
So it really it helps. It is essential for me to realize that there is something, call it a soul, that exists beyond me. So that comes to your question, what happens after we die? It is within the Baha'i writings, it definitely teaches that life is eternal, that there is an eternal part of every one of us that continues on. Basically, Baha'i describes heaven and hell this way, that heaven is closeness to God and that hell is farness from God. But that arrives at our willingness to constantly search for the eternal both within and without. One of the ways I like to think about it is, as most of the people that listen to this are probably Christian, and within the Bible it says we are made in the image of God. And I've often asked Christians, what do you think that means? And I've had them say to me, I have a belly button and God has a belly button. And for them, that God is very anthropomorphic, it's very humanoid. Well, if it is, then is he a white man? Is he a man? Is he an old man? Is he a fat man? And it's like, I don't think so. I think that what makes us interesting beyond this physicality can be hinted at as what you and I are doing right here. We are exploring ideas and thoughts that, if you wish, transcend the material. The idea of subjective exploration or metaphysical questions are those parts of us that transcend our physicality. As a matter of fact, in my studies, even by Paul Davis, astrophysicist from Arizona, I love how and it's not just him, we have talked about how the human being's ability to abstract and think to the level that we do is not evolutionary advantage. As a matter of fact, I saw recently where one of them suggested it might be to our disadvantage,
Yeah.
And so it is a very interesting thing, that ability to reason and think. But I think that to me, it is one of those signs of something about the human being that is beyond. But it really is a little bit of the, are you familiar with Socrates' shadows in the cave story?
Yeah.
It is kind of a point of perspective. If you truly believe all there is shadows, not much a person can say that will convince you differently.
Yeah.
But if you've had the ability to step back and see from a different lens, then it becomes very clear. For me, though, my journey has been to make sure that my stepping back and saying, oh, I'm seeing this from a different lens, wasn't imagination, but based upon sound ideas. So I've kind of done my, if you wish, tallying on both sides of this argument, meaning, is there life, is there not, is there God, is there not? And some people that will hear this will be horrified, because they'll go, Don, it's just a point of faith and you step into it. And I think there is validity to that. But I want, in my obedience, if you wish, to the divine, I think the divine gave me a rational mind also. And it is both rational and emotional awareness. And I think that in the Bible, for the Christian audience, it says, seek and ye shall find, knock and the door will be open. And I see that seeking and knocking both to be done in through holy text and through nature. Nature is God's creation. And I think that with that, there are many signs, if you wish, of the will of God within nature. As a matter of fact, in Baha'i teachings, it says that nature is the expressed will of God. So when we see nature and come to understand it, if we see something in religion that is in total conflict with science, well, then which one are you going to lean into? Walking on water, and it don't mean to sound offensive to some of your audience, maybe that particular verse has a more spiritual, deep meaning to it. So coming back around to the question of living and dying, I'm really not afraid of dying. I would love to live another 10 years. I'm 73, but just a year ago at this time, I was still stomping around in the mountains and hiking, and my physicality was better than most 72-year-olds.
Might be better than a lot of 50-year-olds and 40-year-olds.
Maybe.
Depending on activity.
I was finding elevation a little difficult, but I was still out very active. And so it has been kind of a plummet. I now walk with a cane and I stumble. And for people that may not know me, but it is coming up into my larynx and chest. And so it's moving at a pretty rapid rate. And so, as I was saying, I'm not afraid of dying. I don't particularly like the way, well, let me change it. I'm not afraid of being dead. I don't particularly like the way this will kill me.
There's this class that I was taking this year, and one of the early on assignments was kind of diagnosing yourself in a sense of, do you have a fear of fear? Do you have a fear of dying? Or do you have a fear of death? And it doesn't, I mean, I think with anything, you know, it can be all three of them. It can be one of them. You know, at this point in time, for me, you know, I have a fear of death.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm doing this. But, I think, in this class, you talk to other people and, some people do have terminal diagnoses or just have had, medical issues throughout their life where it's like, yeah, I'm not super pumped about dying.
Right.
That doesn't seem like it's going to be fun.
Yeah.
So I think, with your diagnosis, that's totally understandable.
And it's an interesting one. And I think it's the problem of fear of dying can exist for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah.
One, that we live in this Jewish Christian background where there's heaven and hell.
Yeah.
In other words, you get reward or punishment.
The test.
Yeah, it's a test. And so it's kind of a interesting one in that as people, my dear Christian friends will say, well, you just have to say you believe. And that's wonderful. But belief without works, even in the Bible, it says it's dead. So it's more than just belief. And then the other one is that, well, let's say you don't buy into that paradigm at all. Well, then you have this materialistic, science-based, and that basically says, well, when you die, there's nothing. That's kind of a bleak. And anybody who can say they're perfectly comfortable with that, I think they're looking at it not completely. And this is, I've tried to play with this to be fair for them. You have to assume that everything that you are acquiring, all the experiences, all the knowledge, everything, that at your time of death is just gone. Now, people will argue and they go, oh, no, you live in other people. No, you do not. They remember you.
They remember their version of you.
Exactly.
Which is also different than who you are.
Exactly. So that sense of your consciousness is just gone, and it will never be again. And it is like, as a friend of mine who was a philosopher and an atheist really put it well. He said, the problem with it is most of us think of that even if you don't believe in something beyond, but you do it from this, you're grieving yourself. So yourself is still in the scenario.
Yeah.
We as human beings are not really good at dealing with nothingness. And infinity. We just have no real reference for them.
Yeah, they're really hard to understand.
In many ways, I've heard people say that the human mind is not constructed to do that.
Yeah.
One of my friends, even though he's a Christian man, he's uncertain about his life view of what it has meant. And so he kind of said to me, well, maybe I'm okay with there being nothing because I wasn't before. So if I'm not afterwards, and I said to him, I don't think that works because you and me sitting here right now can imagine the past. We can imagine the future. So we, even in our own mind frame, we go back to the beginning, Big Bang, if you wish.
Yeah.
And so we're not real good at not being.
Yeah.
Well, I think the role of religion, most people want to see it as a fantasy, kind of, we made it up to make ourselves feel good. But the idea of eternity or afterlife goes way back into human experience. They have found burial places of Neanderthal. Even though some people have questioned it doesn't make sense to put a body under the ground and then put relics with it of value that could have been used past with the community, been used by the community, but put it in with these other dead people. not going to use it. So that idea of the importance of showing reverence for a deceased. Now, some people will say, well, elephants do the same, and they have an interesting response with that. And so the next question for me in this journey was the idea of, well, the Baha'i faith, as I was saying, is very explicit that there are a continuation of life, and that the very purpose of starting this life onward is the process of learning and showing love, that we are creatures that should contribute to the world around us, and that we should care very much for our fellow human being. And so I think that it sets a paradigm of purpose. The materialistic, if you wish, idea of that we are really a accident of existence can set us into a perspective that leaves us very much alone, I think.
Yeah.
Religion, and I'll say the essence of religion, and all of them have, if you wish, parts of them that may not make sense and then that do, but there is a thread that runs through them that we can see the commonality of them, in that all of them emphasize the importance of our journey, that we are not here by accident. We are here with purpose to discover that, and discovering it, to emphasize the importance of living it as fully as we can. So I think it's important for people to look at these questions and find some sort of sense and place of which they can work through. If they can't, and I'm not advocating that every person should join a church or religion. I think that, for example, I have many atheist friends who are incredibly moral, kind, understanding, contributing people. I think that where we are very in common is they do see this sacredness of humanity. And in so many ways, I think that atheist and a person of religious faith or spirituality, they really are on a same pathway with a different understanding, not incompatible either. Because you can have many people of religion who've done horrendous things to other people. Yeah, and we don't have to emphasize that. But I think that for me, I have to ask myself if they are really taking the part of religion, spirituality, that should emphasize the kindness to each other. Now, again, we could go in and discuss, and I've had people do this, of, within many holy texts, there are awful things said.
Yeah.
But within them, there are many wonderful things that are said too. And I think in this day and age, the key is to keep those things that we can find in common at the forefront. And I think that going back to the question of how does one then prepare to die? And I've been asking myself that a lot lately on a comical note. I find it comical and ironic, but I've found a lot of things comical and ironic recently that people will go, I can't believe you just said that. But one is in a mindset of realizing there's no getting out of this. Yeah. It's almost like you're waiting for your firing squad. It's going to happen. They're going to pull the bullet. And I love it. And it's true. You're going to die. And in many ways, we aren't different. other than yours is unknown and mine is very known.
Totally.
Yeah. And so yours is abstract. Mine is still somewhat, but every week or so, my body reminds me.
Yeah, there's constant reminder.
Yes, constant reminders. I no longer can drink water without being conscious that I could choke. Eating is, and so on. And so there's this constant reminder because of the loss of my physicality that the time is approaching closer. So my wife and I were talking the other day, and I was saying, I want you to buy a cemetery plot out at this place. And so we got to talking about my funeral, who will help her with it. And so in many ways, I was planning my own funeral.
It's interesting in theory, but probably much different in practice.
It is. I have helped with probably 4 hospice people myself. I have prepared and put in the casket 9 bodies. So I'm not unfamiliar with dead bodies.
Yeah.
And that's a long story of how that started coming about myself. Let me tell you this. When somebody comes and asks you to help them with their dead loved one, you don't say no. At least I don't say no. So I've helped 9 people with that. But one thing you learn real quick, it's not that person anymore. When you and I are sitting here talking, there is this wonderful sense of life and more than just life. For example, you are about 1 trillion atoms, of which you flake off hundreds of them, thousands every day, millions. I could cut off your arm and you're still there.
Yeah.
I can do all this different stuff and you are still there. They say that your body recreates itself how many times through your life, but you are still there.
That's like the whole ship of Theseus.
It is
problem.
It is. But the essence with that of different is that the ship doesn't have consciousness.
Yeah.
And whatever consciousness is, if that the minimum, I think it's a reflection of the soul in some sort of fashion. Now, it's not the personality, because I can get whacked in the head and my personality will change.
Yeah.
But that sense of self. So with that, that is that kind of journey that we think about. And as you're coming, any of us are coming to the end, it's an interesting one to contemplate.
I'm sure.
Now, on a comical note, a number of years ago, I had said, I'd rather know I was going to die than not. But I never anticipated getting a disease that I would know for 3 to 5 years. And I have to say, I've snickered about that in the sense of don't ever ask what you don't want.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know? And so, but it gives you a lot of contemplation time. In many ways, it's oddly enough a gift. I have, through this, I've met you.
Yep.
I've met a number of other people because I have decided, and I know a lot of people have kind of asked, why did I do this? But I told people that I had a terminal disease.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I did it is because people are afraid of talking about death and dying.
Yeah.
And
very much.
And most people, and I'm kind of interested in there's a level at which you can do it for maybe 10 or 15 minutes and then people are done.
Yeah.
You can just tell they don't want to do it anymore.
It's too depressing.
Yeah.
This is too much. Yeah.
And yet, on the other hand, if you wish, since I believe there's something beyond, I'm really getting ready. Death is birth. If we think of the analogy, and this is used in my faith to talk about life beyond, look at a woman who is pregnant. Inside of her is growing this little entity who has no knowledge of anything around. But if you've ever been with a woman who's pregnant, they have the baby, especially to when it's 7, 8, 9 months old, they know it can hear things, but it has no way of sensing it. One time my wife was laying in bed and she suddenly goes, oh my gosh, the baby is pushing on me. So I went and pushed on the baby and moved it, and it had no knowledge. Well, that really, in Baha'i metaphor, the world of the womb is like this world. We are here with a purpose. When we're in the womb, our sole purpose is to get arms, legs, eyes, all that stuff. We do it by design, not by intent. But if something happens to the baby there, then when it's born to the next world, to this world, it's lacking stuff and is very dependent on everybody else to help it. Well, in this world, we have the conscious choice to develop what Baha'is would call is our spiritual capacities, our love, our knowledge, our mercy and justice, and to express those in a meaningful way. So in a sense, this world is, if you wish, is the womb of the spiritual world. And so when this body stops, that soul or that consciousness is born into the next world. And so we would never be fearful of a baby coming in. We look at that with joy and excitement. And so the model, I think, that most of us are raised with, first of all, the idea, if I don't get my faith right, I'm going to hell.
Yeah.
And then the other one, if I don't live the perfect life, I'm going to hell, and so on. Or the model of, well, when I die, there's nothing. I think we need a reevaluation of what that is. And that's how I have personally been, the reason I decided if I'm going to have this disease, I'm going to use it for an opportunity for people to ask me questions. And I've had some doozy questions.
I think, that's one thing that I noticed last time we talked was I think you have an incredible mentality towards it. One thing that I wrote down was that, you said people will ask you all the time or tell you, I'm shocked that you're not angry.
Yeah.
And you were like, how would that help me? What's that going to do for me? So we've gone big picture. So now let's kind of bring it back down. I think, just because of everything we've talked about, and this was initially one of the questions, when I was kind of coming up with the podcast and thinking about what I'd want to ask people. This is the question that I came up with because it felt like something I would want to know about my own family. To some extent, do know your timeline, but, and, not trying to be morbid or maybe bad. I don't want to put any bad luck on you, but that might not be what you die from. So you could die tomorrow. And so if you did, what would you want your loved ones to know?
Oh, an interesting question. I appreciate that. Like I said, I've had some questions off the cuff. One person came up to me about 9 months ago and said, well, how's it feel to be dying? Just out of nowhere. I barely knew the person.
Hold on, let me put my coffee down.
Yeah. And I looked at them and said, well, I'm not really right this minute. I will be in a while. But I thought it was rather sweet, and I loved the fact that they trusted me enough to say that.
Yeah.
So and I think that's one of the parts that I have to deal with. Of that, here's the key to all of it. You and me and my wife and everybody, you don't know that you're going to get home.
Totally.
So what do we really have control over? And it is our emotional, moral, ethical, spiritual decisions we make daily. My sister, she was a fun young lady. She had, as I said, a degree in theoretical math and philosophy. I was talking to her on a Friday night. She lived in Corvallis. She was divorced from her husband, and she was saying, I'm going to take the kids down to Eugene. And I kept saying, no, come on up. We were living in Westlake. Bring them up here. I'm going to go dig a snow cave with the Mazamas, and I'm going to sleep in it overnight, and Dorian can come and hang out with me. She didn't want to do that. She kept saying, I have to take him down there. And I said, no, you don't. Now, the week before that, and we had a tight friendship. She was the coolest young lady, only 32, 33, I think. The week before, she'd been up, and she loved to have conversations, but she was very afraid of dying. But she had a degree in theoretical math and philosophy. So we would get into these long conversations. She was sitting on my couch. I came into the house. She had gotten there before me. And I had been with a friend who had lost his sister. And I sat down and I put my arm around you and said, I love you a lot. Don't go anywhere. And she laughed and said, no, of course not. That was the week before. Friday night, I'm talking to her, trying to get her to come up. That next day, she and her son, one of them, there were two boys, her son was killed in a car wreck, immediately dead, both of them. My nephew, who I loved dearly, walked away without a scratch. And so life is so precarious. We just don't know. But what it really taught me is I could have been angry. People said strange things to me after that. I learned really quick in there. People don't know how to talk about death and loss. They try to be comforting, and sometimes they're more of a problem in what they say. I've had other friends say to me, well, they should have said this and they should have said that. Well, people just don't know what to say because we avoid it.
Yeah, we don't talk about it.
We don't talk about it. So we make all kinds of blunders. And when we're trying to be helpful, we hurt people.
And then when you judge people for what they say,
exactly,
then they don't want to say anything anymore because it's like, well, I'm afraid I'm going to say another wrong thing. Yes. I tried this, it didn't work, so I'm not going to try something else.
No, I had a friend come up after that about a week later. He was a guy I did construction work with, but we were both also school teachers. And he's kind of he means well. He puts his arm around me and said, that was shit. It's time to move on. It's been a week, but I took it on. He's trying to be helpful. Yeah. Well, this is the same thing. People have said interesting things. So what would I want to make sure my family knew? Well, I would say this to you. What do you want your friends to know today in your relationship? Because in regards to that one, you and I are the same. Like I said, you may not get home. So if you have parents, do they know you love them? Brothers and sisters, do you show that you care about them? All of those things that all of us should do on a daily basis, because like my sister and I have to admit, as siblings, we fought. Even as adult ones, we get frustrated and just say, go away. And fortunately, by the grace of God, my last interactions with her were good. And it is not that it's like my wife and I, we've been married 45 years. I know people will be shocked to hear that we still have disagreements.
That's probably a good thing.
Yes. And it is one of those that we make sure anymore, though, after 45 years of not really, especially with the disease, it softens things. You don't want to make sure that the other one thinks you're mad at them. It's not worth getting mad over. Oh my God, I've found that most of the things that I thought were important are not, and so on, because life is a beautiful gift.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things especially with your audience. I want to convey how wonderful a gift it is, no matter how crappy life can be, that it is always worth getting up and living another day. To never let it get so out of control that you don't want to live it. If you come to that point, go get help. And so even for myself at this point, when I know I'm going to die, and I will not fight against my dying because I have grandchildren, I have to do this wonderful balance of showing them that no matter how hard life gets, it's still worth getting up and living. You asked earlier in our chatting, have I ever been angry? And there are moments when I have had to, I get this moment of like, this isn't fun. And it's not. Yeah. As I jokingly say it many times, this is more fun than God meant people to have. and what it really is that, life is tough. And the key is to acquire the emotional and mental skills to deal with it. And to think because we're adults that we aren't still in need of training, that's kind of an odd perspective.
I think we need more training.
Lots, and I agree. And so how do we go about getting that? Well, in many ways, this disease, this is what I'm going to say, is going to be a little odd in that it's been a gift. Like I said, I've not only met wonderful people, but it has made me hone in to truly focusing in on what's important. Yes, we should be doing that all the time. And it is a life that I like to feel that I'd lived my life that way. So it is that going back to that question, what would I want my family to know? It's really the same things that all of us would want them to know. But the one thing I would emphasize with anybody, and I've said this to my kids in growing up, or they're being adults, if you have something you need to say to me, say it now. Don't wait to my deathbed.
Yeah.
Because if there is something that any of us feel is so burdensome or wonderful, get it off our chest. I have this very good friend, probably in your age bracket. He's in his 40s. And you look a little younger. Probably,
a little bit younger.
Yeah.
Not much.
But he said the nicest thing to me the other day. He goes, I really love you. And how many times do men say that to each other?
Oh, never.
But yeah, and it is, I love him as well. We have this wonderful friendship. And, it's not, you don't go through your life saying that all the time with your friends, but you let them know it by the interactions. But what I've also thought, there's a verse from the Bible, it's a one-liner. I'm not even sure I quote it right, but I love it. And it's basically this: it's easy to love the lovable. So that, what does it say? It's the unlovable that make us better human beings, because they are finding it. They are, if you wish, only unlovable because of our inability to see past what we think are flaws. They aren't flawed.
Yeah.
We're flawed in the way we see them. And so they are asking us to be better people. And so it's that kind of thing that if I were to get hit by a car tomorrow, would I want the people around me to know that I loved our interactions together? I would hope they knew I valued them.
I appreciate you sharing all that and taking the time to be a part of this project and sit down with me. I feel like this is exactly why I created the project, to have these conversations and share them with other people that hopefully, can take something from it. And I know people will. So I appreciate your time and willingness. Is there anything else you want to share? Is there anything that I can use this platform to do to help you? Or
no, I think that it is. I want to thank you for asking me to be part of it, and I hope our dialogue, if nothing else, will cause people to ask themselves the question of, can I come to a comfortable place in my own journey? There's a verse from the Baha'i writings that I live by, and it says we're on a journey from God, and unto him do we return. Now, the him is in the ultimate generic English language flaw idea, but it's that idea of the journey, and that we start out on this place and we discover constantly. So I would hope that it would stimulate curiosity. And I want to thank you for doing this. I think it's a bold, wonderful project.
Thank you. And I'm excited that we get to continue our friendship.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of When We Die Talks. I hope today's conversation sparked some thoughts and helped you feel a little more at ease with the idea of death. Remember, this journey is all about exploring our beliefs and fears together, so I'd love to hear from you. Call our voicemail at 971-328-0864 and share what you think happens when we die. Your thoughts might just be featured on a future episode and could help others on their own journey. Until next time, have a good life.